like topics like this around publicity and how to get publicity, because I'm not a PR expert, so I'm going to put that out there as a full disclaimer right about now. But I have to say this. So it's Thursday, and every single day I either wake up and check my inbox, my email, my company email, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it is, and I always have some request from someone about getting featured in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Inc., whatever, Washington Post, the whole 9 yards. And people just consistently love to ask me this. Now, here's the thing. Not only do they ask me, and not only do I sometimes not have the time to answer, I'm going to really be very clear about all of it today, because I am a writer for almost all of those publications, and I have been a writer for Forbes before. I'm going to talk to you about why most people don't respond to your inboxes, your pitches, why most people don't respond to your emails and your solicitations. Not because you're not worth it. So I just want to make that very clear. I am not leveling this up as a measurement of where you are in your business or your mastery versus where you have to be featured in these publications. I'm just going to talk to you about why a lot of times you'll reach out to contributors and they are like, they ignore you. And for me, one of the most I would say annoying things more than ever, and I hate to use the word annoying, but it's the truth. It's my truth. One of the things that really bothers me is when people like consistently, Carol, can I get a feature? Can I get a feature? Can I get a feature? Oh, I guess you just don't want to respond then. And I'm like, okay, there's a reason, and I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to make sure you understand how to get into one of these high profile publications. I write for them all. I've been featured in them all, so I know how to get featured and I know how to feature you. So as a writer, I got the inside. As somebody who's been featured numerous times between Forbes and Entrepreneur, I have been on the Inc. stage a ton of times. You can click off here, go to my website, you will see I have been a keynote at Inc. magazine. I have done it all. So I know how to get in on both sides. And again, I'm just putting it out there before you even ask me any questions. I am not a publicist. I am just a chick who knows how to get in. So, hello, Mr. Harrell. So I'm going to tell you first and foremost, before we even get started, about this. And bring a friend, tell a friend, because I promise you when I'm finished with this, you'll understand why so many of us don't respond, why so many people reject you, why some people don't even read what you're saying, and why it works like that. So before I even get into that, tell a friend, bring a friend. I'm not going to do this again. I don't do too many of these. So the first thing you have to understand, before I get into any points whatsoever, you got to know the difference between a writer and a contributor. Let me say that one more time. You have to know the difference between a writer and a contributor. I, Carol Sankar, am a contributor, which is much different than a writer. So when I don't respond to your emails, it's because, hey, I don't really give a rat's behind. It's not personal. It's because I have other businesses. I get this is a privilege to be able to be in these publications. I get the privilege of writing. I don't have to. So in other words, if I don't feel like creating content this week, I don't have to, because I am under no obligation to do anything. So when people like to barrage my inbox filled with, can you cover me? Can I talk to you about da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da? The thing is, you have to understand the difference between a writer and a contributor. A writer is a staff writer. Those are people at Inc. and at Forbes and at Entrepreneur who are on staff, and their primary job is to write content either on a daily or weekly basis, depending on their cadence. They are actually in their office doing that. That is their job. That is what they get paid to do. Us contributors are on the outside. We do editorials, but we don't have to do it by any cadence. If I got something to say once a month, I write once a month. If I don't want to write for 3 months, I'm not going to write for 3 months. I have the right to do that because I am a contributor. In other words, because of the success of my business, I get the opportunity to do it. So I don't have an obligation per se. It's not a job for me. I get a privilege because of certain standpoints that I have made along this journey. So with that privilege, they contact certain people who have either expressed some level of success or may have achieved some level of success, or maybe they have measured something that we have done, and they invite us in but with no necessarily a major obligation. There are some people in the contributor level that are at different levels, some people who have taken more of a bigger editorial platform, and some people who have not. I'm a person, I have a bigger editorial platform at Inc. than I do at Entrepreneur. And so with that in mind, when you know the difference between a writer and a contributor, and let me tell you, if you don't really know the difference, if you read my byline on Inc., it tells you right there, contributor. Find somebody else and you'll see writer. Two different things. The writer has to be on staff. They are actually on staff. Those are people who are either editors, they sit there and they write all day. They have a certain amount of content they have to put out every week. For example, my editor is a writer for Inc. Magazine. I'm just telling you Inc. Magazine's story. So he's there 5 days a week. Sometimes he's there 6 days a week. And so he'll email me from his staff. So I'm under no obligation to take a story idea because I'm a contributor. I have a real estate company. I have my speaking business. I have a lot of other things going on. And if I don't feel like writing, I don't have to. That's the difference between writing versus contributing. The contributors have no obligation to write what you're asking them to write. A lot of times the writers will come to us and say, hey, just give an example. Hey, perfect example. It was Black Women's Equal Pay Day. And one of the writers reached out to me because this person felt guilty about not being a Black person and writing about Black women's issues. And my byline is called The Confidence Factor for Women. So they reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to cover this? And I'm like, yeah, I'll cover that because I've already started writing content around that. But if I didn't feel like it, I have the right to say no, where the writers don't have the right to say no. The writers are hard to get in contact with, but the writers are there to be able to produce content nonstop. Us as contributors, we have other things going on. This is not our primary focus. And a lot of times when people consistently reach out to people like me, what they are not thinking of is if you read my bio, you'd understand that this is like at the last part. So if you actually if you're on LinkedIn right now, if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that writing is the last thing because all of the other things that are before that are primary. Contributing to these publications is at the last of my list because I, number one, don't get paid for it. Number two, I do it when I feel like it. So it's more of a volunteer experience than it is an obligation. Just reading your question. When you reach, are you given a reaching person you think they are, are the people named? I don't understand. Anna, can you resubmit that question? When you reach, are you even reaching the person you think I don't understand the question. If you're talking about when you reach out to the publication, are you reaching the person you think you're reaching out to? Yes, you are. Are they reading it? 90% of the times we're not reading it. And it's not your fault if that's what you're asking. We just, again, the invitation process for us contributors is different than, and I'm not here to talk about how to become a writer for the publication. I'm not in that business. I can't help you with that. I've been invited, so my invitation is how I got in, but I can't teach you how. I don't think I'm very well qualified to teach you how to get into the publication if you're looking to write. But how the writers look at people who are looking to get featured is a totally different subject. So, no, that's okay, Anna. Just resubmit. I know everybody's typing and texting to type. It's a lot of stuff. So just resubmit. It's fine. So just like I said, point number one, you got to know the difference between a writer and a contributor. Contributors are people who have gotten the invitation. So we contributors have other things going on. I'm running multiple companies at the same time. And because of the success of her company, can we ask her to write about some things for us because she understands business? In other words, if you're in a business publication and the person is just a writer, then they may not know about business. So they bring on people like me and other people who have been successful and have been measuredly successful in business to be able to write about business or leadership or women or gender issues, whatever it is, they bring us on. We are contributors. We are under no obligation whatsoever to accept your pitch. So when we don't respond, you have to understand you are reaching out to the wrong person, because our main focus that brings in more, brings in more publicity, brings us more opportunities, brings us more business is not there. So if I don't respond, especially right now, my LinkedIn inbox is on fire with people asking me, can you look at this story? Can you write a story about? No, I don't feel like it. I'm a contributor. I have a ton of other things going on long before I sit there and write an 800-word essay about your tow company. I'm not going to do it. And a lot of other contributors, I'm not the only one. We all feel the same. We have a million things on our plate. And then when somebody pitches some idea that is completely outside the box, you're like, really, what is this? So that's point number one. Read the difference between a writer and a contributor. If you're reaching out to someone who you actually saw their name on the publication and you reach out to them, number one, if you did not read at the bottom, it says the name of their business and it says either guest contributor or writer. If you read that the wrong way, I guarantee you a contributor will never respond. We just don't feel like it. It's not our thing. Unless the contributor is in marketing or branding and they feel like they always have something to say, many of us, we are under a privilege and we don't have to respond. So it gives us that flexibility of not having to do that. So that's point number one. Please make sure that that's your number one thing. Don't ever say Carol didn't give you the inside. Contributor, writer. I personally really rarely respond because many times people that pitch things to me have this idea that I must put down the rest of my business to be able to write a story about something. And I'm like, no, that's not my job. Did you read all the other things I've got going on today? Did you actually look at the fact that I was speaking and I had an event and a training and all of that stuff that's listed on LinkedIn? And then you're going to turn around and ask me, Carol, can you write a story and I need it done by tomorrow? Oh, sidebar. And don't offer me money because money doesn't incentivize me to move. And it doesn't incentivize a lot of contributors to move. So just even really think about that. Number two, write and post often. Because even if we don't actually read your pitches, the thing is we saw your name. And if we saw your name and we go to validate you and we can't find anything on you, 9 times out of 10, you won't hear back from us. Because let's just say, I'm giving an example. Let's just say I'm sitting around and I'm about to write a story on how to negotiate. And you just pitched me something in my inbox about negotiating for salaries. And I feel like writing a negotiation piece right now. And I'm like, man, I need an expert to be able to quote in this article. I can't find an expert. But you sent me something. I didn't read it, but I saw your name. And then I said, wait, let me scroll through my stuff again and let me see. And then I click on your name and then I go to look you up and you have no content whatsoever around negotiation. Then I'm going to feel like then the issue really is that you are not really, I don't know how to explain it, that you're not really doing what you say you do and that you're really not paying attention to the level of your credibility, if that makes sense, right? So I want to make sure that you are always on a level where I can always validate and see your level of expertise. So if you're not writing and writing often, you're going to have a problem. And that major problem that you're going to have is that when I then look up your name, I'm not going to see anything. And then I'm going to be kind of worried, like, hello, I don't see anything with your name on it. So if you don't write and post often, I won't know whether or not you really do the things that you say you do, or if you just put that out there and just want me to cover it because you just want some coverage to be able to put on your website that you've been featured in a publication. You have to be the person that validates your own credibility. So make sure you have content out there that if somehow your pitch sparked my interest, that I'm able to say, oh, okay, wait a minute. I saw that they have this. I saw that they have that. That gets me to really starting to feel like, okay, maybe there is something there. And perhaps it will lead me to follow you a little bit. And in following you, I will see things that you said, and maybe I'll just quote what you already written instead of actually having a conversation with you. Now, I will validate that quote by making sure that I reach back out to you and say, hey, Barbara, hey, and I saw a post that you had on Facebook that where you talked about people negotiating da-da-da-da-da-da, and I quoted it in my latest article. That will actually get you in much faster, but you have no content, nothing out there, and then I can't see what you're actually doing. It makes me a little suspect because if you want to be quoted, I need to have something to quote from. So if you're not posting often, if you're not speaking often, if you're not visible, it is going to be very difficult for me to even validate why I'm looking for you or what I'm looking for from you. So I just want to make sure you understand that people are going to want to see that you already have stuff out there that we are actually judging from, rather than you just saying, oh, okay, well, I want to be quoted in your upcoming article. So post and write often. Even if it's just verbal content, post and write often, because those are the things that I can actually quote from. And like I said, I can always reach back out to you and let you know that I quoted you without even having to talk to you. It is easier that way to be able to start the conversation between you and I, because I'm always looking for resources, meaning I'm tired of rehydrating the same people over and over in my content. So to be able to get new resources, I got to see that you have a resource. You can't be like the first time I post something, it just happens to be that Carol picked it up. No, it just happens to be that I saw something that you were already doing and I'm quite interested in it. So make sure you're doing that. Okay. Number 3, please, and this is going to be the hardest one. And I don't know, my chat just somehow went away and I don't know why. So I can't see your questions. So if you have questions, I promise you, for those of you who are on LinkedIn, I don't know, my chat just went off. I will do my best to answer them when this is over because it just went off. So number 3, this is a hard one. And listen up, listen, really, this is a really serious thing. Don't pitch your life story. We're not interested. You want to get into Forbes, you want to get into Inc., you want to get into Entrepreneur. We don't read or write about your life story. This is not the A&E network. We don't write about your bio. Like, we're not interested in those things. And I know it's hard to tell people that and mean it, but your bio gets you nowhere. Your life story gets you nowhere. I once was such and such and now I found such and such, or I was homeless last year, but this year I'm better, or I made 7 figures yesterday because I sold this product. We're not reading that. Reason being is because we have people like Oprah and Steve Jobs and Michael Dell and Mark Cuban, and we have specific people we could do that all day from. But in order for us to get you the positioning you need, in order for us to keep our byline, your life story does not matter to us. On the other hand, if you have something you can teach us, that's a totally different subject. What most people get wrong is that they treat writing or getting featured in these kinds of publications, they treat it like Facebook, where you can go on Facebook and have a complete drama-filled Facebook live stream and people just join and they want to hear it. They want to hear how bad your life was. This is publication. We don't have time. Writing takes time. We have to write a story. We have to narrate it. We have to talk about your experiences in it. We don't have time to talk about the Little House on the Prairie. That's not how this works. And if you can't appreciate very hardcore criticism, this is not going to be for you. Give me something that my readers will learn about. If you have nothing my readers will learn about, I guarantee you I will not respond. The whole, I was sleeping in a car and now I'm not sleeping in a car no more because I'm sleeping in a mansion. That story doesn't intrigue anybody. And I'm going to tell you the reason why we're very hard on answering those stories. Because I am not the final editor. This is not like some fly-by-night publication. I have to submit it to the editor, and the editor is going to want to know what's in it for the reader. So before I even spend my time writing something that's going to give any honor to what you want, I have to also send it to an editor who's going to ask me, why did you take 5 hours out of your day to interview and to write this story about whomever? I don't see the point. And those things start adding up because editors all of a sudden start getting a little bit, suspect. Why do you keep trying to cover people who are giving you their life story? And it's understandable. The issue is your life story is interesting to you and it's a good book. And I understand that. And I'm not discounting what you've went through. I'm not discounting your experiences, not one bit. What I'm saying is if you want a feature, you've got to get over the life story element. What you actually have to start doing is getting yourself in an element to learn what is the teachable moment from your life story. So if your life story was about being homeless, talk to me about the thing you did to go from homeless to this. Not a mindset thing. We've all done that a ton of times. 5 ways to think your way into being rich. We don't need that. Give me the thing. There's a thing in there, but maybe you haven't identified it because you're so used to doing the Ayanna Van Zandt fix my life story, that you don't understand how to find the lesson in your own story to be able to pitch to someone. So don't give me the whole life story. Give me the teachable moments. Give me the thing. So for example, I listen to a lot of Dan Lok videos. I love Dan Lok. Dan Lok, shout out to you. One of these days, I'm going to feature you. I just haven't had a chance to really get through to you yet, but I will, Dan Lok. You are on my list. So Dan Lok talks about the thing that he did. So in his story, he talks a lot about when he immigrated from China to Canada, he met a mentor and how he found this mentor because this mentor sent him an email. And then he talks about the lesson in meeting the mentor. That's the lesson. It's not about coming from China and making millions. No. He didn't skip that. He gets very granular about what this mentor told him and how he interned with this mentor for how long. And that is the teachable moment. So the story that I would write around that if I were in that space would be about the effectiveness of a mentor to take you from zero to $100 million in 10 years. Here's how. Something like that. I'm just paraphrasing off the top of my head. But there's a specific lesson in that. When you are trying to tell me all about how you broke up with your man and then after the man left you, I go crazy. I'm like, this is not Lifetime. This is not Lifetime. It's not a Lifetime movie. I'm not spending, because you also have to think about it. I don't get paid from this, right? So here I am spending hours talking to you and then hours writing it, then another few hours waiting for an editor. That is wasted time. So let me just get this out of the way. Your life story is not going to take up 5 and 6 hours of my day. And then you're going to every minute, Carol, did you get it right? No, I'm not doing that. And most contributors will not, because we have other things to do. I keep telling you, this is not our main job. So with that in mind, you have to be in a position where you're like, look, how do I make sure I'm not telling my life story? And also within not telling my life story, where's the teachable moment? And if you don't know the teachable moment, here's a great way for you to figure it out. Write it all down and find where the hook is between where you were and where you have become. There's a hook in there. Like I just told you about Dan Lok. There was a hook in there about him not knowing English, coming to America, seeing this email, and getting hooked on this particular mentor and what this mentor somehow taught him. And that mentorship really aligned him with his principles that he practices today within the level of advice that he gives. So what I'm saying is there's something in there that you're probably missing that maybe you need to really, you got to make sure you know your own hook and your own story. You got to know you got to know where your transition points are, because again, I said it in the beginning for those of you who may have come late. Contributors, we don't have the time. We genuinely don't have the time to read through your life story. We genuinely have other things to do. We are not staff writers. We are not sitting around the office waiting and finding the next Bill Gates. Like, that's not our thing. We are actually doing the thing that we have been honored to do. So in other words, we get the privilege of writing because we have built something successful and a publication invites us to write. But we are not sitting around writing all day. So when you're sitting around and you're giving me the life story that you want me to waste time on, when I have other things to do, just so you can get a little collage at the bottom of your website that says you've been featured in, you're not thinking of the person's time that you're wasting. So when people don't respond, it's because you've gone a little too far in, oh, woe is me, my life is, I'm like, seriously, we don't have time. And so when staff writers don't respond to you and we don't respond, you think that it's because we are sitting around saying that you have to be Bill Gates to get in. Not at all. It's just that Bill Gates has a transition in his story. He talks about a transition in the story. Mark Cuban talks about a transition in the story. Everybody has a transition. That's why they're covered so much. So when you find that transition, you get covered a lot more. For example, if you look at my byline on Entrepreneur Magazine, you'll see in, I think last year, July, I covered Jamie Kern Lima. Why did I cover Jamie Kern Lima? I'm glad you asked, right? Jamie Kern-Lima at that time had just sold It Cosmetics. If you don't know who It Cosmetics is, you need to go check it out. She had just sold It Cosmetics for $1.6 billion with a B, $billion. It wasn't the $1.6 billion that was interested in the story. It was a transition point of her building it and finding a way to fund it to get on QVC that I wanted that interview for. Aha! So I didn't waste my time with the sale. The acquisition, of course, it's impressive, but the actual thing that I was really interested in was about the transition from thinking of it as a concept and how she was able to fund it to get to QVC. Because if it wasn't for QVC, then she would not have launched a brand as big as it was, and so on and so forth. So I went to her office and I learned about how she was able to kind of self-promote. Then she took it from self-promotion, because this was prior to the time of YouTube. She took it from there, and then she went ahead and used some money that she had from some of the sales. Mind you, she was a meteorologist before that. She took some money from some of the sales and bought her way into infomercials at night. That's kind of like the story. So the story was about the infomercial. So if you really read the story, you're more impressed with the headline. I'm more impressed with what's in it. And that's what my editor was interested in. My editor was like, oh, that's how she did it. It's the story. If she sat there all day and gave me her life story, I'm telling you, Jamie, you're a nice lady. I love you. I love you, James. But I don't have time for that. I have other things to do. Mind you, I flew all the way to New York for this interview. So what I'm saying is, you got to find what's your thing. Don't give me your life story. Give me the thing that I'm going to need in order for this to really move forward. Okay. Now, the next thing is, number 4, you're going to read the writer or contributor's byline. And what a byline is what do we normally write about? You know how many people, especially, for those of you who are watching on LinkedIn, this is also restreaming on YouTube as well. Do you know how many people email me or inbox me on a daily basis on LinkedIn that have nothing to do with my byline? Oh, Carol, can you cover about my story about Bitcoin? My byline says I write about gender equity. Why are you asking me about Bitcoin? It has nothing to do with what I write about. I write about business, leadership, expert interviews, and gender equity. That's my specialty. I study gender equity like the plague. Every day I'm in it. And you're asking me about Bitcoin? I can't understand it. Or, I'm thinking about launching a speaking business. Can you write a story about that? What does that have to do with my daggone byline? Or the ones that I like the most are, Carol, I read your stories religiously. They're great. I can tell you didn't read them, because then the next question is Bitcoin. You didn't read it. That's dumb. You don't pitch to a writer without reading the content, because then you miss the opportunity. Of course the writer's not going to respond, because you are not in close proximity with my byline. So if your story is about Bitcoin and my article digest is about gender equity, how do we align? Do you think all of a sudden I'm going to change from women's issues to Bitcoin? I'm going to become a Bitcoin writer? Like, no, that's not how it works. That's how it works. So I'm telling you, if you don't read it, we know that you haven't read it, because a lot of times people spend so much time in the pomp and circumstance that they don't really read the byline. So if you haven't read it, we know you haven't read it. And I'm telling you, a lot of contributors, we laugh about this stuff all the time, because what we keep saying is, if they had only read it, they would have known to pass over this one and go to someone else who is in that specialty. So if you're about finance, find somebody in the publication you want to go to that writes about finance. I also do real estate. When I first started, when I got my first feature in Forbes, it was about real estate. So when people say, well, you started writing for Forbes because you got into Forbes. No, I got into Forbes because somebody featured me about real estate. It was a real estate writer about real estate. When I got my byline, it was about gender equity, because that's normally what I write about. I'm not good at writing about real estate. I'm good at doing real estate. I'm not good at writing about it. So I made sure that I was very clear about what kind of byline I wanted. An editor is not going to change your byline for you unless you say, all of a sudden, I'm not doing gender equity anymore. I am doing, specifically, I'm going to be doing Bitcoin. So you have to be very mindful. when they don't respond, it's because you are not even in close alignment or proximity with what the person's writing about. So if you want to be featured in any of these publications, do yourself a favor. Don't just randomly find people, because let me also tell you this, and that's probably something I should have said in the beginning. We don't know each other. So there's I think 1,100 of us who write for Inc. magazine. None of us know each other. There's probably like 5 of us who know each other personally, but many of us don't meet each other. And do you think I have the time, especially when you ask me, to find the finance writer who's going to write about? Do you think I have the time to, again, going back to contributor versus writer? I'm a contributor. I don't have time to go find out of 1,100 people who I've never met who writes about finance. My editor is my editor because my editor specializes in my topic, and it's not my job to contact my editor to ask my editor to go find the editor, because then if there are 1,100 writers, that means I think it's 10, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's either 50 or 70 writers to every editor. I can't remember exactly how the math goes because there's a lot of us since then. Do you think they have the time to go find out who the next editor is so that we can make sure we find the best writer for you? Like, we don't have that kind of time. So since you've done a lot of the research, find the person who does. And then on top of that, within that, if you're going to go pitch to an editor or a writer, you have to find the right one. And I'm going to also be honest with you. Editors are just as vague as we are, because editors get the same problems that we get. All of a sudden you follow an editor, and then all of a sudden you start pitching to that editor, and that editor does the exact same thing I'm doing. You have no content out there. You're pitching Bitcoin, and I am a marketing editor. You're doing the same thing to them. And if you think we don't all know each other, we do. We just don't have these conversations that regularly because of the fact that, imagine if you get 5,000 emails a month, you'd only probably get 5 real people who are ready to go forward. So that's why I said it really makes the difference between getting in and not getting in. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Last but not least, validate your own credibility. And what I mean by that is this. You have to come up with your own byline, your own storyline before you pitch to someone like me. So I'm not imaginative enough to find a story that only works for you. I have to find a place where you fit in. But if you have already found that for me, you actually have a better shot at me responding than if you don't. So the rags to riches story, how I stopped sleeping in my car and I started sleeping in a bed. I'm not interested in that. But if you have a specific thing and you have already written the topic for me, you actually intrigue me more, because now all I have to do is flip on the research to go with it and to validate what your validation is, if this makes sense. I hope this makes sense a little bit. So the main reason why so many of us don't respond is this. You pitch us a lot of stuff. It's like confetti. You just throw the confetti in the air and hope that we figure out what you want. It's not our job. Not at all. This is why I'm being so blunt with you, because I feel as though people have this idea with this confetti mentality, and they want it insta. They want insta confetti. Like, I'm going to throw all the confetti and Carol's going to find out which one works. No. Here's what you do. You should literally find a way to create the topic for me. And what I mean by that, give me 5 or 6 suggestions on how you think your expertise navigates within what I do. So let me take the Jamie Kern Lima example that I just gave you for a moment. If the Jamie Kern Lima story means anything to any of you, there's a point in there where she talks about having to repetitively send samples to different people and going broke in the process. So the storyline, if you were writing it or if you wanted to be featured, would be something like sending samples can be the difference between striking a deal with L'Oreal or not. Here's how. Something like that, right? So you have to figure out where the byline fits. So if I don't know what you're trying to cover because you've just thrown a whole bunch of confetti at me and you hope that I catch it, and then I don't necessarily respond, it's because you have no idea what the direction is. You just want, as seen in Inc., as seen in Entrepreneur, as seen in Forbes, but these publications don't function like that. A lot of times, especially for Forbes, when I used to be at Forbes, Forbes wants you to pitch the title before they want you to pitch the story. The other publications want you to pitch the story before the title because they will change the title anyway. Either way, there's something in there that you have to be able to talk to me about in advance. Now, I don't try to have too many conversations with people. I always try to tell people, email me as many things as you can so I can make a decision very quickly. But if that is to be so, you can't just say, hey, can you write about women that lead at big corporations? Like, that's a very broad topic. Get specific with me. Tell me exactly what you want me to discuss. What does it matter? What's the matter that you really want to cover? If I don't see it, I kind of skip it, because then I can always go to, I've got access to Sheryl Sandberg. I've got access to Lena, and I got access to McKinsey. I don't need this, right? I don't need this right now. I don't have time for your misdirection. Like, show me the exact direction of where this might fit. If it is about, for example, there was a story yesterday that I wanted to do, but again, I didn't have the time to do it. That was about the effectiveness of women getting on boards in the state of California since the 2018 legislation that required boards that have at least one woman on every seat. So there have been 470 seats that have been taken since that time, which is starting to equalize the C-suite in the state of California. I wanted to cover that, but I had no one to quote yesterday. Not one single person. So if I have nobody to quote, guess what I do? I go to my typical sources. I go back to then that's when you start thinking that, hey, this is all they cover. I go back to McKinsey & Company. I go back to Lean In. I go back to because now I have nobody else to cover. But if you had pitched a story like that to me, I'd have been interested yesterday. If yesterday you had said, according to the New York Times, 470 seats have been taken, and this is why, or I just wrote something about why women are now starting to fill the C-suite in the state of California, I would have been more interested in that. I would have reworked the title, but I would have had an idea of what you're doing. But just throwing this confetti at me and saying, hey, you need to talk to me, Carol. I want to write a story, Carol. I want to be featured in Forbes, Carol. That doesn't work. And also, I'll give you this before I go, because I think a lot of times, us as writers, we're not very expressive about why we often have to overlook people. The issue then becomes, a lot of times you're not very specific, you're not very narrow. And you have to remember that our publications are very narrow. We may have a lot of writers, but because we're not all writing at the same time and we don't know each other, it's a very narrow space for us to be in. So when you have these broad topics about just business and leadership and diversity, you kind of leave it up in the air and you're not very specific. Then those publications don't necessarily want to hear us pitching stuff. And I'm going to tell you, as a contributor, and I said this in the beginning, and for those of you who've been late, let me say this again. You got to know the difference between a writer and a contributor. I am a contributor. I am not a staff writer. I am not a writer for them. In other words, I am not on staff with any of these publications. I am a contributor. And most of us are contributors. There are very few writers. Very few writers, a lot of contributors. We have been invited. We have had that honor of being invited. If you're going to ask me about how to get in, I don't have that advice right now. I know I was invited. So I have my invitation letter from Entrepreneur, from Inc. I have people at Forbes when I used to write for Forbes that I could still call on if I need to. But there's a reason why we've been invited. With that in mind, this is not our primary focus. So with that in mind, when you come to us, everything has to be very narrowed down, because it's not our job to be able to figure out what your broad base is. And on top of all of that, if I may for just a second, because we have editors, and our editors are sometimes very, very direct. None of us as contributors, the ones of us who are on the outside, we don't go to an office, we don't report we're not like that. We don't have the time. Please understand, if you don't like wasting time, believe you me, we don't like wasting time either. We don't have the human time to waste to pitch something to an editor that they're going to reject anyway. Because once you get to write, as long as I've been writing for most of these publications, I don't have time to spend hours on something that doesn't get picked up. And I'm not pitching it from publication to publication because I already know what their structure is. So a lot of times when people say, well, Are you guaranteeing the story is going to run? I can't guarantee that, but I'm not going to pick up anything that I know for a fact won't make it in. And so with that in mind, it gets a little bit dicey because I personally, and I know most contributors that I know of, we are not going to spend time writing content that's not going to make it through. This is our like, think about it. You don't like wasting your time, right? None of you do. And I'm sure that if I were to ask you, do you like working for free with no money and wasting time? And your answer would be no. Because of that, and because we are gatekeepers in a lot of ways, because some of us have very popular bylines on all of these publications, we're not just going to pick up things just randomly and just say, oh, I'll just write about it. Like, that's not how it works. Because the main question that I want to answer at the end of all of this, which is right about now, is the role of publicists in this debate. So some of you want to get in, and I completely understand that. I completely, and I'm reading some of your questions because my chat box on the side has completely died. All I see is a sad face. I know I'm here, but all I see is a sad face. I see someone saying, who do the stories need to be submitted for consideration? Who do the stories need to be? I don't understand the question. Who do the stories need to be submitted to for consideration? So a story, you're talking about to get in? If you mean to get in, I'm going to give you that. Just chill. We've only been here for like a few minutes. Like, you're way chill, my man. All let us wait, just wait. All let us listen to 18 webinars, and I'm giving one, and all I can't wait but 5 minutes. Anyway, LOL. Just joking. The role of the publicist, and I'll answer your question in a second. The role of the publicist. Now, when it comes to all of this, I can tell you one thing that actually supersedes all of your requests are the roles of publicists. Now, why is a publicist going to be the most important part? If you are a thought leader, a speaker, someone who thinks of yourself in a high regard, and you're like, either A, money is not tight and I can invest in one, or B, money is tight, and if I'm going to invest in a publicist, I want to make sure it gets in. My main concern to you is every publicist is not the same way all of us are not the same. In other words, I'm a contributor, not a writer. Same way publicists are not a dime a dozen, meaning they're digital publication publicists, and those people normally have our ear and normally have our direct contact. I can't tell you how many publicists have my direct phone number. And as soon as there's something to write about, they call me. And I'm interested in them because they have been the intermediary between you and I, because they found a way to do exactly what I just talked to you about, so that I don't have to sit around and kind of figure out, what's your byline? What's your story about? Please don't pitch me Bitcoin, because now they have a whole list of, don't pitch to Carol about Bitcoin because she covers gender equity. Let's make sure we're reaching out to a contributor and not a writer. And they know all of those things already. But a good publicist, a good one, like not the fly by night, not the ones who just trying to get your little speaking gig, not the one who just trying to get you on the podcast, not those. Those come a dime a dozen. There are digital publication publicists. I would love to give you names, but I'm not at liberty. Many of them, what they do is they build a Rolodex with us in it. So if they have something specific, they only contact us directly. Like they will, phone call, texting, like, hey, oh, really? Okay, I'll call you in 5 minutes. That's how it really works. The reason why the digital publicists work a lot differently than a regular publicist, because a regular publicist throws all kinds of things at a wall and hopes something sticks. A digital publicist knows how to write a press release to give us the main points, which are everything that we just talked about. They wrap it up in one little small form and send it to us. So it'll be a 1-2 paragraph little thing and send it to us, which helps us to be able to redefine how we're going to look at this thing. That doesn't mean that we pick up all stories from a publicist, not at all. But it just means that someone like you, if you don't feel like this is Carol's is way overwhelming, I have to know how to write my own byline, I have to write topic, I don't have time. If you feel like that, imagine how we feel. But in other words, if you don't want to do it, you hire a digital publicist. But that digital publicist has my direct phone number. You may not have it, but they do. So what they will do is they'll contact, and they don't pitch the story. They already pitch the idea of where it fits. So they get specific dates. So for example, there are tech dates that they have. So they'll know this is Tech Month, or this is the LGBTQ month, or this is Women's History Month. And so they'll pitch that exact date. So then they'll say, we have 5 people we think you should talk to, and this is the reason why I think one of these people you might want to talk to. They write a little small paragraph and they give us an idea. We don't have to talk to anybody, but it makes it much easier. The thing is, in my opinion, if you feel like it's overwhelming, and I just told you on our side it's overwhelming, then hire somebody to do most of this for you. Because for the most part, the rejection that you're feeling, that you feel as though we don't pick up your stories, we don't read your stuff, is because it's not being sent to us the right way. Again, you're sending confetti and hoping that we find the blue piece of confetti in this big thing that you keep sending us. And it's not our job to do that, especially, like I said, contributors have other things going on. We don't write for this. In other words, I'm like an independent contractor. I owe no one anything. So if I want to write, I write. If I don't feel like writing, I don't write, right? I just told you that. Where a digital publicist has done a lot of this work for you. So you might want to, if you feel as though it's worth the investment, invest in a digital publicist, because they will actually get all of this stuff done for you. And they know how to be able to create the exact ambiance that you want to be able to be featured. And they know how to quote you correctly. They know how to get us quotes correctly. They know how to create the interview, create the intention around the interview, and we work through it together. As opposed to, Carol, can we get on the phone real quick? I want to tell you about my Bitcoin business. Carol doesn't write about Bitcoin. Carol, I promise you, it's like Bitcoin, women and Bitcoin is the biggest thing. And I'm like, I'm ignoring Bitcoin, but it's about women and confidence and Bitcoin. And so in other words, you have to get onto a point where people are like really concerned with how you create the content. Well, if that's not something that you do, then let the digital publicist do it for you. It's a high investment, but think about it. For those of you who are interested in anything that you have to do that is worth anything, sometimes it's better to invest in other people to do it, because then you'll be spending a lot of time trying to do this yourself and finding that you are getting frustrated. And so going back to my initial point, I understand completely how frustrating it can be, especially if you email a person like me and I don't respond. It's not you. It's just that you're throwing a lot of confetti my way and I don't have the time for it. Plus, again, I'm going to keep repeating this. If you don't know the difference between a writer and a contributor, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt, because contributors rarely respond unless the contributor is saying, well, let me see what I can do. And because they have nothing else they have to, write about. I have about 7 to 10 stories ahead of today's release alone. So I don't have the time to write about your life story. But if you had a digital specialist come my way, they have mostly done most of the work for you, and then you don't have to do this. So it's like a little bit of a catch and pull. Okay, there's 2 questions here that have been bothering me, and I want to answer them. But before I answer them, let me actually say something. Hold on. Like I said, my actual screen went down for those of you who are on LinkedIn. Anyway, let me be completely honest. I remember I saw the question and I don't see it. Oh, about submitting to become a writer. Again, I don't know how to do that. That's not within my wheelhouse. A lot of us contributors have been invited. There's an invitation process. Do yourself a favor. You can submit an inquiry to any of these publications, from Inc. to Forbes to everybody, and it's very hard to get in, because imagine they're getting about 25 to 3,000 of them each and every single week, from people who are always saying, yes, I can write about this, I can write about that. And a lot of times, I'll tell you a little inside secret. A lot of times the reason why they don't respond to you is because the exact thing I just sat here and talked to you about, and if you don't believe me, just, when I'm finished with here, replay this video. A lot of times they are doing due diligence on you too. They can't find the same things that I can't find. So if they don't see that you have content out there, they don't see your posts mirroring up with what you say you do. So you talk about that you are a For example, you're someone who does education policy for corporations, but you have hot girl summer everywhere on every post that you have. They're looking at it. Every time you look around, we are looking at things. So if they see that you're inconsistent, they don't actually respond. Or if they do, they say, they have nice ways of saying no. At this time, we have met our maximum capacity. That is not true. It is because of the fact that there is somebody who audits your stuff when you actually submit a submission, and you are not appearing as the person that you say you are. So they are going to have a huge difference between what you're pitching versus what you're saying. So if you have pictures of your dogs and your family, and it's beautiful, but it's everywhere you go and nothing ever says that this is what you do, they're looking at your social media structure more than they're listening to your website. And the reason is because you have to remember, I write for 2 publications right now that a combined total of 6.6 million people read my content every single week. 6.6 million people. On average, I get about 1.6 million click-throughs. So with that in mind, they don't care about what I say on my website. I can make that up any day of the week. But if my other content outside of that doesn't mirror what I want, then when they put my post up on their website to their 6.6 million people, there's a problem. There's a problem with messaging, because then my message does not match what they were looking for. So then I might lose that opportunity. So if you're looking to become a writer, you're looking for that invitation. You got to get more consistent and more, I wouldn't say just consistent, but you have to get more specific with what you do. Very specific. And can I give some of you a little word of advice too? Because I know that this gets a little bit tricky, especially for those of you who call yourselves coaches. Stop with my client said, my client. Stop with that. Like, you don't speak English. Like, you don't speak, like, I had a breakthrough today, or I discovered, or me. My client. We see it. And when we see it, we know for a fact we don't cover them, because these are what we call self-adorning people. My client. As a person who has had that privilege before, attorney-client privilege, you don't ever talk about what your client just got unless they got like a big breakthrough. So you don't want to do the my client. Do the I. Start your sentences with I. Do a lot more of that. I just discovered, or I just read a book by, or I just came up with a white paper of that, and I do a lot more I's. But if it's my client, that is speak and talk to get more clients. But to get them to answer you about being in the publication and writing for a publication or getting a byline in a publication, they don't want to hear about your client, because then what they think is going to happen after they retain you as a contributor, they think that you're going to use your client privileges to be able to onboard clients, to be able to be quoted in your content. So that's why they don't do you got clients. Oh, okay. Pass. We'll go into the next one. And that's why they ignore you, because a lot of times people have this idea by saying client that they're doing something, but they're actually hurting your reputation, because what they are doing is it's a red flag. It's like, oh, okay, so such and such is going to take on some of her clients and bring them here. And that's not what we're looking for. Because again, remember, this also goes through a secondary process. It's not just about people considering you for writing. It's also about someone else reading the content to be able to say that it's worth it. All right. There's another question in my inbox. Here we go. My inbox again, ladies and gentlemen. There's another question in my inbox about, what about pay to play? We don't do pay to play. We don't do pay to play. So if you want to offer a writer or a contributor money and they take it, just be ready to, that's not something we do. It's illegal. I don't allow people to pay to play with me. That's just not what I do. Everything that I've ever written, I've never gotten paid for. I also look at the fact that as a contributor, my biggest payout is that I get access to the kinds of people that a lot of people don't get access to. I also get the kind of speaking opportunities that most people don't get speaking access to. I also get the kind of feature opportunities that people don't get access to, because I have a huge validated platform that is beyond just being on social media. So what I use it for is I use it for those purposes. I have a secondary reasoning for why I use what I use. But if you want to pay to play, what you'll find is that there's a very short window in there of being able to stay on target. And like I said, here's the thing. You got to know the difference between a writer and a contributor. No writer is ever going to say, you got to pay me to be in here. There's a lot of relationships. Let me tell you something. The world of being a contributor is very rewarding out financially if you look at the bigger picture. But more than it being rewarding financially, you get a lot of perks that the average person just can't get. I get a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of opportunities to fly. Well, when we were flying before COVID, I got a lot of opportunities to fly to certain things. I remember when Clairol was coming up with one of their new hair brands, their hair oil brands. I'm a big hair fanatic, and it was all women that were doing the marketing campaign a day to literally preview of it coming out long before it came out. I had first dibs on it. And so my story ran before the actual product hit the shelves. People ask me about that. Those are the privileges and perks that I get. So I don't want to get paid from anyone to be able to be in the publication, and money doesn't move me like that because I get paid in other ways. So what I'm saying is, if you really want to get into that kind of thing by paying to play, those are unethical people. And look, it doesn't last long term. So you don't necessarily want to get into that. All right. Are there any other questions that I have not gotten into? Hopefully I have. Yeah, the vanity thing, vanity public relations. I'm going to leave that alone. But that's the reason why I'm like, too many people have this idea that it is, you know, I'm going to get a PR firm and the PR firm is going to get me in. And that PR firm is just throwing stickers at a wall and hoping to get you in. And what I feel so bad about, and let me tell you something, I'm a very compassionate person. Don't judge my little bit of snarkiness with you guys. But what I get upset about is that many of you pay the first publicist that tells you they could do anything. And I'm going to tell you, I wish I could share my screen with you so badly. And maybe we'll do a Zoom one of these days and we'll figure it out together. I get so many bad, like requests from horrible publicists that literally do the same exact thing I just told you. And I'm sure that they got $2,000 to $3,000 out of you in a vanity press kind of thing, and promising that they can get you something that they cannot get you. That's why you have to go digital to be able to get somebody who's highly credible. And I wish, like I said, there's some contractual obligations I have to honor. I cannot give you names, but there are a lot of them that are only digital. And honestly, they cover just everyday people, and they know how to create that balance. But if you keep going to all these fly-by-night publicists, and then they contact me with something that's even worse than some of the inbox messages I already get. And then you say, Carol, well, you don't answer me. And you didn't answer my publicist. Well, your publicist was even worse than you, because the publicist has some janky thing that they put together. And then they want to know, well, why aren't you responding? And then what I don't like about some publicists that are below grade is that then they have a nerve to keep following up. And then their follow-up is even worse than did you get it? No, I'm not answering. I remember, true story, a publicist reached out to me. I did not respond to this person's pitch. They went over my head and went to the editor to try to get me fired. I'm like, for being a contributor, you really want to get me fired? Like, seriously? Like, what are you doing? You're making yourself look bad. I don't have to respond to you. And the publication even said it. The contributor does not need to respond to every request. They don't have to. I don't work for them. I'm an independent contractor living my best life wherever I want to live it. And I get the privilege of writing to them. So be very mindful of the credibility of the publicists. I'm telling you. And if you want to know some good publicists, I'm not trying to sit here. I'm not trying to sell my brand. Do yourself a favor. read all of my content, and anybody who I featured, find out who those people publicists are, and I guarantee you'll find a better publicist, because some of those people, I've had the opportunity to work with their people, and I love doing repeat business with them because it's easy, because they help me to do all of this that I just told you about, and so that I don't have to sit around here and figure it out. But again, I wanted to do this because I feel as though there comes a moment where, because I don't answer and because I don't respond, and because of the fact that a lot of times it may make it seem as though you have to be somebody in order for you to get featured in these publications, that the reason why you don't hear from us is because you're not Bill Gates, or because you're not Steve Jobs, or whatever it is. And that's far from true. It comes down to how you create the value up front for us. And it really is that throwing of confetti, that reaching out to everybody. Again, most of the publications I write for, we don't know each other. We are not friends. We are not people who go to a kumbaya meeting. I think an entrepreneur, there's 2,000 of us so far and counting. We don't know each other. So when you have that many contributors who don't know each other, we run into each other here and there, especially at specific events and webinars and stuff like that, but we don't have a long-standing relationship. What ends up happening is, when I don't respond, and when you say things like, well, can you contact, or can you put me in contact with such and such? I always say, boy, I wish they understood the politics of this. I don't know who that person would be. And it's not like I'm trying to withhold information from you, but I don't know who that person would be. And because I'm a contributor, I don't have the power that it's going to take to ask my editor to stop doing what he or she is doing to be able to find the right person for you, because that's not how this works. They have a specific Rolodex filled with the kind of content that they want to come out with for the week. They'll suggest it. If we want to write about it, we do. If we don't want to write about it, we don't have to. And then they'll have a staff writer do it instead. So that's where it becomes a little bit tricky. Julie. Hello, Julie. Where do you recommend people start writing to show what they know? Medium is a good idea, or posting articles on LinkedIn. I got started on LinkedIn. I've written about 250 articles that are right here on LinkedIn. That's how I got started. I got found on LinkedIn. I also have my Medium profile is dwindling a little bit because I'm not posting as much, but I got started on LinkedIn. And so that showed a publication like Forbes, when we first got started, that I have the ability to be a wordsmith. So I didn't have to work this whole send me a demo and showing you that I can actually do this. They actually saw content. And you'd be shocked how many other contributors, before you even get into publication, they already know about you, especially if they see content. And what they'll start doing is they're quoting your content. And like I said, I think I said this already, they'll start quoting your content directly from LinkedIn in their content, and then they'll start reworking it, and then they'll contact you and say, can I have permission to, talk about such and such. For example, there's a Forbes article I wrote a long time ago called Why Don't Women Negotiate? I can't tell you how many times that article has rerun in different publications. How did it get to Forbes? I'm glad you all asked. That was an article that was on LinkedIn, and somebody on Forbes liked it and submitted it to Forbes. And then Forbes contacted me and said, hey, can we have that article? And I'm like, sure you can. Anything, anytime you want an article, you can have it. And I just remastered the end of it, and I took it off of LinkedIn and gave it to Forbes. That's kind of how that happened. It's the same thing with Working Mother. I wrote an article that was on Medium, and the article said something about the balancing act. This is before COVID. I just don't remember exactly what the verbiage was. Something about women having to balance. And at that time, I was doing these, what I call like Dear Carol letters. So it was like giving advice on Dear Carol. So it'll say stuff like, Dear Carol, and it'll just go into a story, and I answered the story right on on Medium at the time. And I got an email, not even an email, I got a tweet from Working Mother magazine. And then when they tweeted me, I was like, okay. I kind of looked sideways like, okay. And then they were like, can we have it? I was like, sure. And so I gave that one to them. So a lot of times when people think that I'm just a writer, they don't understand that I've written content for years on LinkedIn and Medium. And some of that content, even though it says that I'm a guest contributor, I wasn't a contributor at the time. I'd written some stuff that they wanted because they wanted to, let's say, monopolize my voice a little bit. So I put a lot of stuff out there. So again, that's how you can kind of get started. So I hope I've answered all of your questions and queries. And for those of you who are just like trying to figure this whole thing out, like I said, there's no one way, but I can tell you that the one thing that does not work is the consistent barraging of people's inboxes about writing about me and please feature me. And I think I'll be a great person to quote. That's not quite how it works. And I really do wish that there were more transparent moments like this from every publication. They don't talk about this. And a lot of times it is because they don't necessarily clarify that many of us on the outside are not staff writers. So you might get confused by just seeing my name and seeing so much content from me, not understanding that I'm not a staff writer and I don't have to be a staff writer. So it is my privilege to write. So because it's a privilege, I don't accept a lot of outside solicitation. So when I don't answer you, or if I do answer you and I don't give you what you want in 30 days or less, it's because I'm not a writer for them. I'm an independent contractor. And with that independent contractor status, that means my company comes first. Carol Sankar's companies come first. Writing for these publications is a privilege. With that privilege, I get to write when I feel like it. If I hear something that tweaks my interest, I'm on it. If I don't, and I don't see anything and I'm not on it, oh well. And again, just because you said it doesn't necessarily mean that that's something I want to cover. And because of the fact that some of you pitch things that are way outside of my expertise spectrum, I'm not going to spend too much time trying to research my way into making it work. So you might as well find somebody else who is in that expertise. Bitcoin is not my thing. Finance is not my thing. How to build cars is not my thing. How to start a crochet business is not my thing. And it may be a thing. I just don't know who that person would be. Do your homework or find a digital publicist who has already done that homework, who can find that person for you, because we are not a one size monolith. Like, we are not a monolith at all. And I think that sometimes people approach us as writers as a monolith, and we're not, because no two of us write about the same thing. No two of us have the same level of expertise, and no two of us have the same byline. So we're not going to quote the same people. But it is important that you understand that just because you put it out there doesn't mean it's of value. And it doesn't mean it's of value to me. It just means maybe it's not for me. And a lot of times I try to tell people that, like, maybe it's not for me. Maybe you might want to find somebody else, but don't ever ask a contributor to go find it for you, because they're not going to, because we don't know who to go to. You go to the publication themselves and you look through. If you're in technology, look through their technology section. Who writes about technology? If you're looking for gender equity, go to the gender equity section. Find out who writes about gender equity. But we are not a monolith. So you find very quickly that because we're not a monolith, and because of the fact that we genuinely don't want to take on stories that are way beyond the scope of what we would want to take on, that may get rejected because our editor is right within our sightline. I don't want to disappoint you because the story might not come out as good. So, might be a little hard. That's awesome about your LinkedIn article getting in Forbes. Didn't know that was a possible pathway. Yeah. Anything that you write, let me tell you something, because I got to go, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry. But you wouldn't believe how many buzzing bees there are out here looking for content. We're all scouring for content. We're all hungry for it because a lot of us don't have enough of it. Like, for example, I have no article this week being published anywhere. No. I'm sorry. I did publish this week in Entrepreneur about negotiation, but normally I do about 3 to 4 articles a week. I'd had nothing to quote because I have nobody to quote from. Nobody. I tried a lot of different things. It didn't happen. And again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time working on things that are not going to have an ROI for me. So when I don't find any inspiration, I just don't write about it. But then on the other hand, if I've written something, you'd be shocked how many buzzing bees there are between LinkedIn, Medium. There's still a few on Tumblr. There are editors who are sitting there. Now, what you will never know is why they're actually watching your content. Again, many of you will miss this opportunity because we could pull a quote from you if we saw your content. We don't have to necessarily call you like, Julie, I need to talk to you. We don't have to do that. We're like, oh, Julie wrote an article. Oh, wait a minute. It's about women starting businesses and I'm writing an article. Okay, so I'm going to save Julie's content and then I'm going to later on rehydrate it when I need it. Right? But only when I need it. And then I'm going to quote you. And then I might put your link in there. And maybe I'll give you, like I'll do all of that. But then right after my editor says yes, I'm not going to tell you beforehand. I'm actually going to do my work. And then when my editor says yes, I'll reach out to you and let you know, hey, I saw something that you wrote in January. I thought was absolutely amazing. And I'm going to quote you. You rock. Then you're in. Now, the 1,100 of us who we don't know each other, we all got notified that Carol just quoted Julie because she's now a new person on the inside. So now we're on the inside because one thing we do fight for each other's resources. Like if I don't know a source or whatever, like we'll definitely share resources, but I don't know who they are. So a lot of times like you'll see somebody else saying, man, who is this Julie person? Next thing you know, they're Googling you and that will help to be able to get the process rolling. But if I don't see any content, I'm not just going to take your written word for it because I'm going to tell you something. There are some unreputable people out here that we end up writing about, and then you'll find out later on that it's more problems than it's worth. And I would love to give you guys some names, and I'm really going to stay away from denigrating some people. But there's some people who I have followed for many years, and I just kept saying, I'm getting close. I'm going to write about that person. And then, that level of reputation because I followed them on YouTube and I couldn't necessarily, I couldn't authenticate them. And so then when it came around that there was some SEC stuff and things that were, I'm glad I didn't. So what I'm saying is if you wrote it and we can authenticate it and we can actually go and research what you're saying, you're in. It doesn't take much. But again, last time I'm going to say this, you can't get in a publication and not write at the same time. Like we're not just taking your word for it. You think everybody doesn't think that their grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe is not the best? Like, don't you? Like my grandmother, I miss you, Granny. I thought her chocolate chip cookie recipe was the best. And probably you think the same of your grandmother too. Everybody thinks that their stuff is the best, but it's the person who has the recipe book on the shelf. That's the person I'm going to quote, not just you. So in order for me to get to you, I need to see that you have content out there that really matters so that I can be able to quote it, or that I can see that you have relevant content that I can, divulge from. And sometimes, even if you're at the beginning stages, just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. I'm living proof. My stuff started on LinkedIn. I didn't just wake up and say, oh my gosh, Carol Sankar's name needs to be in Forbes. That's not how it happened. I wrote one article that went to another, that went to another, that went to another, and I kept doing it. And the next thing you know, this guy named Roger Ma calls me and says, hey, you want to talk finance for Forbes? And he quotes me. And then next thing you know, 2017, I'm quoted in Forbes as being one of the top diversity experts of 2017. I'm like, oh, I'm in a row. Then Forbes is like, hey. I'm like, hey, Forbes. Oh my God. They're like, you want to come over? I'm like, yes. And then, the rest is kind of history. If you want to get into that kind of stuff, you don't have to pay to play. You don't have to join anything. You don't have to hop on anybody's anything, but you have to do exactly what I said. But the first thing you have to do, because I got to go, remember, there's a difference between a contributor and a writer. Do not get it twisted that we are all a monolith. The staff writers have to write. If you want something immediate, pitch to them, but understand there's a high probability that they will do a lot more investigative work than we will. We normally have a list that we kind of have together and it's already working for us. We also have many other things to do. So we are still parents. We still have companies we're running. Those of us who are in the business sections, we have companies we're running. Those of them who are in the leadership section, they are still sitting in the C-suite. Like, we have a lot of things going. We are not just sitting here writing. One of my all-time mentors, she's still a professor at Columbia. She writes for Inc. magazine. She's still having to get in the classroom and teach. It's not like to say she's just sitting around. She writes great negotiation pieces for Inc., but she still teaches. So we are contributors. We have other things going on. So if you pitch her an article, same way you pitch me, she doesn't have the time. She's in the classroom. A lot of times I don't have the time. I'm running a company. There's some people who are running with the real estate expertise in Forbes. They don't have the time to answer your inquiry. They're busy running real estate companies. So you just have to think this through. Like, who do I need to reach out to? And if a contributor doesn't answer, maybe I didn't take this particular step. Maybe I did not write out the byline properly. Maybe I'm reaching out to the wrong person. Maybe I did not clarify why I need to be able to be featured. Maybe I didn't validate my own credibility. Maybe I didn't do all these things. Maybe I did not clarify where I am. Maybe I don't have enough content out there. Maybe I don't have enough quotes out there. Maybe I'm not public enough. And once you kind of work on those things, it'll change. I hope I've given you some value today, because for those of you who sent me inbox messages and you're mad that I haven't responded, here's my response. I don't accept confetti. It's really, really hard. I have enough of other things that are going on, and I am under no obligation to respond. I don't work for them. I am an independent contractor. And so when I feel like writing is when I feel like it. Not just because you have a story does not necessarily mean I'm in the mood to get carpal tunnel to write it, because I don't feel like it. And it's not because I'm lazy. It's because I have 5 other companies, a kid, homeschool, and a lot of other things going on. Oh, did I also mention that I'm writing my book? I don't have time to write a story about the first time you burnt your little toe and found the amputation method that works best for you in your living room. I can't do it. It's just, you haven't told me what's the value prop in that. So if you're not selling me on value prop, and I don't know who to tell you to send it to, and you're thinking I'm ignorant or arrogant because I won't give you a name, and I don't know who the other 1,100 people are, please don't get upset, because I don't know who they are. What you need to do is go back to the publication and find out who's in the medical section and who covers people who amputate their toes at home, and find that person. And if you want to curse me out later, you are welcome to do so. But please understand, I'm a contributor. So you can curse me out all you want. You can write to my editor all you want. You can ask him to fire me all you want. I'm still going to be a contributor. It's not going to change. It's not going to change, right? It's not going to change who I am. It's not going to change what I do. And, if I lose the privilege of writing for these publications, hey, I've written over 200 pieces of content, so I'm okay. I'm not going to die. Like, I'll just go on to the next thing, because I always figure it out. I'm a free spirit like that. So I always say I'm between a little bit of sage and a little bit of myself. So it is what it is. All right. I've got to go, ladies and gentlemen. But if you need anything else, feel free to post below. I apologize that my chat box is off. I'm doing my best to answer all of your questions here. But if anything happens and you need anything, post below. I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. Maybe we'll do this again some other time, because I do realize that this is of some value to some of you, because I realize that it's not about the quality of your expertise. Understand that everything that I said here today is not questioning the quality of your expertise at all. It is questioning how you pitch. That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying that you're not valuable. So I don't want to give you that impression. You are. What I'm saying is how you pitch the value is very important. And the next time we come on, maybe I'll do this. I'll talk to you about how to get a yes. And maybe we can formulate a plan right here on how to get a yes. Okay? Thank you so much for being with me on Thursday. Watch it again, share it again. We'll see each other soon.